Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Silicon Dragon online event. It's a special program that we have today. It's featured Hong Kong and Hong Kong Restart 2022. We have a great program lined up for you this evening or this morning, wherever you're tuning in from, because we do have a global audience. We have more than 300 people registered, so I hope everyone is logging on successfully and joining us right now. So anyhow, to kick this off, I would like to turn the podium over to Lawrence Eng from Invest Hong Kong. I actually started my career internationally in Hong Kong. It was years ago, and I was editing an international business magazine in New York at the time. And I had a chance to go to Hong Kong and explore, and I fell in love with the city. I think a lot of other people are in love with the city too, and they really care about its future, as you can see with the number of attendees for this program this evening. So we also, besides Charles making some introductory remarks, then we also have a VC panel. We have a presentation on the economic side of it by the Bay Area Council and their chief economist, Sean Randolph. And then after that, we have a FinTech innovation panel, and then we have a close. So stay with us. It's about an hour-and-a-half program, and we look forward to you asking your questions. You can put your questions in the chat box. We'll get to the best ones. I'll be monitoring them. So make sure it's a good one. All right, now I'd like to turn the podium over to Charles. And welcome, Charles. Thank you again for your support from Invest Hong Kong. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Rebecca. Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, wherever you are, dear friends. And welcome to this US edition of the Start Me Up Hong Kong Salon in conjunction with Silicon Dragon. Today's Start Me Up Hong Kong Salon with the theme of Hong Kong Restart has me excited for our future. To say that the last year has not been easy for all of us is an understatement. But what has been shown in the last years and months is the resilience and innovation that has developed in such times. Startups have been quick and agile enough to adopt and adapt to constraints and displayed a willingness to work with other organizations to produce solutions. So you'll hear from some fintechs today as they share their journey on how they've grown despite those challenges. In Hong Kong, the innovation and technology space is going from strength to strength. The city has been a perfect testing ground and a launchpad for startups with everything a startup needs: funding, markets, infrastructure, talent, a simple tax regime, and a business-friendly environment. The INT development is among the top policy priorities of the Hong Kong SAR government. We are determined to developing Hong Kong into a knowledge-based economy and an international innovation and technology hub, thereby enhancing the competitiveness of the city, creating quality employment opportunities and improving citizens' quality of life. The current term government has committed over $14.7 billion to the innovation and technology development in the city, with 8 priority areas, including increasing resources for research and development, pooling technology and talent, providing investment funding, and supplying innovation technology infrastructure. What's more, for businesses that need funding, one of the most forefront and foremost international financial center, Hong Kong, offers everything from trade financing and working capital through to green bonds and, of course, listing opportunities to the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. The government has set up $255 million innovation and technology venture fund to co-invest with startups on a matching basis with selected private venture capital funds in Hong Kong. In the recent budget in March, $640 million has also been allocated to set up a new investment fund, namely the Strategic Tech Fund, managed by 8 GPs appointed by the government to invest in technology enterprises which are of strategic value to Hong Kong, as well as investment opportunities conducive to enriching the INT ecosystem. The Greater Bay Area development brings valuable opportunities to Hong Kong's INT development, leveraging on its advantages in technological research and development and internationalization and its status as an international financial center. Hong Kong can pool together innovation resources from the Greater Bay Area and the world to promote R&D on INT and to boost our competitiveness. You will hear more about this area compares with the San Francisco Bay Area later on. Suffice to say that there are great business opportunities to be had for companies that want to take opportunities to explore further. Hong Kong business advantages has attracted over 9,000 global businesses to the city, and it's easy to see why. Our corporate tax at 16.5%, with the first $255,000 profit tax at only 8.25%. And with Hong Kong being a free trade port, we don't have either taxes such as GST, VAT, or sales tax. We have a common law system, and we are consigned on comprehensive double taxation agreement with 45 jurisdictions, which means that we have a great base for expansion into the region. And Hong Kong's talent are high quality and international, with 5% of the top universities in Hong Kong in a top 500 100 US ranking globally. And the technology admission scheme of immigration, which attracts talented professional with specific industry experience to settle in Hong Kong. Invest Hong Kong has just launched a startup entry support program to help startup founders and staff with their visa application. If you're interested to learn more about the startup ecosystem in Hong Kong and the potential opportunities here in the region, we have 2 hybrid flagship events which are coming up. One, the first one, the Start Me Up Hong Kong Festival, which will run from the 5th to the 10th of September. And that will really cover a number of areas such as sustainability, the GBA, health tech, gaming, digital entertainment, prop tech, and smart cities, amongst others. The Hong Kong FinTech Week, in the first week of November, will also showcase all the champions in the FinTech ecosystem and also bring together all the champions and the stakeholders in the FinTech ecosystem to really propel the Hong Kong into the next great opportunities for FinTech. And we're a city that's now more than ever open for business, hosting an unrivaled strategic location, world-class infrastructure, and a government that really supports the business community, from pin-sized startups to world-beating heavyweights. And we look forward to welcoming you all to Hong Kong and seeing you in person. Please do reach out to offices all over in San Francisco. We have offices run by Lawrence and his team, and the Start Me Up Hong Kong team here in Hong Kong will provide you with more information. So we hope and we wish you a very fruitful discussion ahead. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Charles. That was a good opener. We appreciate that. And rah, rah, Hong Kong. Look, there's so many people here who've already put comments into the chat. People from the Bay Area, from Colombia, Latin America, from Toronto, from San Francisco, from New York, another from Silicon Valley, one from Vietnam. This is amazing. Here's another from New York, one from Hong Kong, Macau, San Diego, Sydney even. How do you like that? This is a real global event. So we like that a lot and appreciate you joining us. So, okay. Now I'm going to segue into just a little bit about what we're up to. And as a group, just give me a minute. Well, here you can see our group getting together. And all right, so we're going to be going to our VC session first. We have Melissa Guzzi, who's joining us from Arbor Ventures. We have Chibo Tang, who's joining us from Gobi Ventures. And we have Andy Tang from Draper Associates here in Silicon Valley. So good. I think everyone else, if you would just turn your camera off until so we can focus on Andy, Melissa, and Chibo. Okay. Good. All right. And Charles, if you could sign off as well in the meantime. Okay, also Arnold, also you sign off for the moment so we can focus on the VC panel. And Sean, same thing for you. Everyone's getting to know one another this way at least. So, okay. Well, look, as I said, I think we have a terrific program lined up, and look, why don't we just launch right into it? And it would be great that if each one of you could just say a few introductory remarks about your own point of view about Hong Kong Restart and where Hong Kong's position is now as a startup hub. I think it's grown a lot in the last decade. Certainly, I've seen it really blossom in the last decade, but there's been a lot of changes in the last 2 years, 3 years, and you know, maybe the future will hold more changes as well. So I think it would be good to get an idea from each one of you what you think about that and what your own position is. And of course, I think Carl's already previewed the startup program that's coming up soon in September. And we're one of the salons for that whole Start Me Up program. And I think that's the date again, September 5th through the 10th. Okay, so stop share for a moment here and focus on our wonderful panelists. Sean, could you sign off so your name is not on the screen? Okay, I don't know why that's happening, but it is. Okay, there we go. Andy, I see you bright and clear there. So why don't we start with you? Andy, yeah.
Good morning to our friends in Hong Kong and Asia, and good afternoon to our West Coast friends, and hello to everybody else. So my name is Andy Tang. I'm a partner at Draper Associates Fund, as well as Draper Dragon Fund, which I started. Draper Dragon is a cross-border U.S. Asia fund, and Draper Associate is an early stage IT fund, global opportunity. As I mentioned, we focus on early stage tech startups. We're typically a seed to Series A investor, and sometimes we will opportunistically invest in the growth capital. We are a generalist fund, and I personally, over the years, kind of went from started with a few sectors to becoming a generalist. Now I realize I got to focus on a couple of things. So the two areas I personally focus on are healthcare investing and crypto investing. Web3, crypto, blockchain investments.
Well, there's a lot going on in that area for sure.
That's right.
Yeah, so it'd be interesting to hear a little bit more about that. Okay, Chivo, do you want to go next?
Sure, thanks, Rebecca. I think it's been a while since we kind of hooked up on the Silicon Dragon talks. But my name is Chivo Tang, managing partner here at Gobi Partners. I run the Greater Bay Area GBA practice. I was based in China for Shanghai for many years, but since 2016, I actually started to invest more here in Hong Kong. So I think we were one of the earlier ones to kind of come into Hong Kong and really have a fund that was focused specifically in this region. And so I got to see firsthand the whole ecosystem here grow, and we made a few investments early on into some of the local unicorns here. But today we've grown with the ecosystem as well, come a long way, and we're managing about 3-4 funds now, focused here in the region. Everything from early stage, writing 100, 250K checks, all the way up to 10 million. So we're looking at growth capital as well. And we work with a lot of the local corporations, family offices, of which there are a lot here in Hong Kong, and obviously the government-backed programs, Science Park, Cyberport, quite a bit. So we're quite entrenched here, and lucky enough to have a portfolio that exceeds 70 companies now, pretty much all based here in Hong Kong. So it does cover quite a wide range of sectors, and also stages But we're super excited about what the future holds, and are trying to do our part and the integration of Hong Kong with the rest of the GBA. So happy to talk about that more in the rest of the panel.
Okay, yeah, that is a good topic, I think. Melissa, it's great to see you.
Good to see you as well. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Hello to Andy and Chibo as well. Yeah, I lived in Hong Kong 13 and a half years. I'm the founding partner of Arbor Ventures. We only focus on fintech globally, but we've had our originally start was in Hong Kong, and we continue to invest throughout the region, mostly early stage, a little bit of late stage, but all around financial services.
Okay. And so let's dive into the topic for today, which is Hong Kong's future and as a startup hub. And so why don't we go around and hear each one of your views. So Melissa, let's start with you.
Well, see, I've been a proponent of Hong Kong as a startup hub since 2011. So going on 11 years here. And when we really truly believe that Hong Kong should be the fintech hub of Asia, and given its role that it plays in the capital markets, and just the role it plays in the industry that we would definitely see innovation in around banking, we'd see innovation in insurance. And I think that's proven to be true. Hong Kong is extremely important, will continue to be important, especially as China's influence grows in the capital markets. And as the stock exchange, continues to attract tech companies, local tech companies, as they move away from the U.S. markets. So we've been a proponent of Hong Kong as a fintech hub since the very beginning. I think we really were the ones who started it, and continue to believe that it is the right place, the optimal place for a company to start that's in the sector.
Okay. Andy, from where you sit in Silicon Valley, I know you've been to Hong Kong many times, maybe not recently, but yeah, my last time there was about January 2020. But
That's pretty recent, but although I feel like most people haven't been anywhere recently.
yeah.
So my experience in Hong Kong has been really stellar. I still remember one of the first trip to Hong Kong, and this dates back, I want to say 15 years ago, Cyberport. It left a strong impression to me that it is a great place for talent. Just a lot of great universities, cranked out top-end talent, which really rivals the Bay Area. I just remember that lots of Stanford professors would quit and go teach in Hong Kong, and they will produce this next batch of students. And one of the things I noticed is that a lot of these businesses may have been created in Hong Kong, but they blossom across the border in Shenzhen, right? The DJI of the world. So I kind of consider that as a greater sort of Hong Kong ecosystem, regardless of where it grows up. And today, this is has been 17 years since I first invested in Hong Kong. I really have seen the ecosystem blossom. Cyberport 15 years ago was not, was very, a little modest, but today it's completely different. And I think it's sort of a great place to find great talent and really incubate and launch companies. As I mentioned, the two areas I cover, and I could comment on those two areas, what we work with, what we do with Hong Kong. On the healthcare side, it really is a place where we sort of take our companies public, right? Especially in Asian, a lot of it, whether it's China-based or cross-border, it's got a great capital market for us to sort of launch. I think Charles mentioned the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. So from the late stage perspective, it's sort of a no-brainer. Early stage, and I think Melissa touched upon that on the fintech side, because of what I do, with crypto, we actually looked at quite a few interesting crypto companies in Hong Kong. Some of which we invested, some of which we did not. And Rebecca, you wrote a great piece on CNBC about Animoca. So that is a great example of a great Web3 company, came out of Hong Kong and really helped define the global metaverse standard and thought leadership. And we also seeded a company, and speaking of Hong Kong's financial leadership in Asia, if not the world, we seeded a company that were started by a couple of founders who left Hong Kong Stock Exchange. They started the Hong Kong Bit Exchange, and since then they've done very well. This is probably one of the most closest to the fully compliant, crypto exchange in Hong Kong, but really serving, greater Asia. Yeah. So I'm going to pause there.
Okay, well, those are really innovative investments that you've been making. What do people think about the pace of startup activity today in Hong Kong? I know there's been kind of some trying time with the pandemic and the travel restrictions. Has that slowed down the pace of activity at all for any of you, or are you still maintaining kind of your usual? I mean, Chibo with 70 investments, I think you must be in hyperspeed, but I don't know. What about the rest of you?
Is that a question for me or the rest of them?
Yeah, well, any change in your pace? I mean, how are you able to do 70 investments, in how many years? I don't know. It's not that long, is it?
Yeah, 5-6 years. We started off, pretty slow, maybe doing 5-6 investments a year, but in the last couple of years, we've been doing over a dozen. So, I think the pace has really picked up. As both Melissa and Andy mentioned, I mean, those are all sectors that we invest significantly in. Some of the fintech companies here in our portfolio, I mean, they span a range of different sectors and use cases in that space, and a lot of them, quite a few of them are unicorns here, right? So we have WeLab in the virtual banking space, Airwallex cross-border payments. I don't know if you put Animoca into like a fintech company, but Animoca, Amber, there's quite a few of unicorns in that crypto space that have come out of Hong Kong. And I think like the talent here, as Andy mentioned before, I mean, especially in the fintech space, because there's such a big base of kind of financial services, it's just very deep, right? And so that's an area that we continue to look very closely at. Healthcare, but even other sectors in deep tech, like materials, like semicon, those are all areas that we're looking at. And there's plenty of professors and kind of R&D talent out of the universities here that are working on very interesting projects in those areas. But obviously commercialization has always been a challenge for those types of teams. But as everyone in Hong Kong kind of becomes aware of the ecosystem, it's really more of a zeitgeist now. Everyone is pushing towards more innovation, more technology. And so I don't think like, the pandemic or anything like that is really holding back, the wave of innovation that much. I mean, I think at this point, I mean, it's just too many people are pushing in that direction in a long-term kind of developmental perspective. So, it's going to happen. And, the next 5-10 years as more of these developmental projects get rolled out, implemented, as the talent has time to kind of relocate, to kind of come back into Hong Kong and start their companies. I think that there's only going to be more going on here. So we'll continue investing.
Okay, well, I see Gobi's name on a lot of the really good companies, and a lot of the unicorns too. So you've managed to get into some of these great deals early on, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you still working with Alibaba on managing the funds?
Yeah, so our of the three, I mean, one of them, Ali, is obviously the sole LP. The second one, they're an anchor LP, but there are also many other kind of external LPs in that fund. And so, I think we still very close partners with them, and obviously they still help out our portfolio with the rest of their ecosystem. But, we also have a lot of new partnerships that are also strategic to the area, both Hong Kong and GBA. And, we're leveraging upon those resources to help the portfolio as well.
Okay. And Melissa, I know you've spent a fair amount of time in Hong Kong and actually Southeast Asia as well. So what's your assessment of Hong Kong and its future as a startup hub and your own pace of investment?
Well, I think everyone's been impacted to a certain, well, not everyone's been impacted. There's still been a lot of money invested over the last 2 years. But I would say, I don't think anyone has been disadvantaged by the lockdown. Personally, I pretty much have limited my own traveling. I don't really have any desire to get in a room with 200 people and be part of a super spreader event. So I don't think that whether people have locked down or not locked down has really changed the dynamics of the venture industry at all. I think everybody's gotten pretty used to Zoom. So I think our pace definitely slowed down during the COVID. I think part of it is we've been monetizing the existing portfolio, which has been great, as well as raising a new fund. But it's, I still believe that when we come out of this, well, first of all, we're going to live with this on and off for many years to come, probably. But I think, no one is really disadvantaged by the different policies. It's just whether people are traveling more or less. And so I think Hong Kong will continue to be in the premier position for leading fintech investments in the region. I think others have tried hubs, but you need the core talent, and that's what Hong Kong has always had. Hong Kong's always had the core talent around financial services, and that's hard to replicate anywhere else in the region.
Okay. Singapore.
Singapore was my home, still is my home, but I think it's been harder than they think, because there's two, when it comes to fintech, there's B2B and there's B2C. And I think that personally, we've been investors in B2B. And if you want to control everything on the infrastructure side and on the architecture side, then you're really cutting out a lot of opportunities. And I think that's where Hong Kong has always let sort of the markets be more developed in a organic entrepreneurial way, where I think Singapore has done a great job around fintech, but it's really been more, what you've seen emerged are more B2B facing, a little bit B2C facing versus B2B. So I still think there's a talent shortage in Singapore of the same level of financial services professionals than what you have in Hong Kong, which just has a longer history.
Yeah. Well, true. And Andy,
it was the most diplomatic way I could answer the question.
it was very well done, Melissa.
Yeah, I could actually follow up on that, because we oftentimes sort of think about where to spend time, both from deal sourcing as well as how to advise our startup companies, because our startup companies are becoming more and more global. They could set up shop anywhere, right? It's sort of the sign of time when our Gen Z founders, they just want to be nomadic. So
yeah, a lot of them, I've noticed that. Like, I'll ask somebody in their 20s or early 30s, where do you live? Well, I'm just traveling right now.
Yeah, and
Okay.
the amazing thing is, it travel to wherever there's Wi-Fi, so pretty much it's limitless.
Yeah.
So we often think about this sort of within Asia. So for instance, we have people now this is the Draper Dragon Fund. We have people now in Shanghai, in Hong Kong, in Singapore, in Bangalore. So we kind of look at the region almost as a whole, holistically, because talents are kind of a little bit transient, right? It's no longer that well defined, even though traveling is been difficult. What happens is people then they move to a different country or a different spot for better overall lifestyle, but then they still get the work done. And we also notice a lot more businesses are formed by hybrid teams, right? So you have two people in, say, Hong Kong, one person in Singapore, and then there's another person in Korea, and then you have an odd person in Brazil, you know? So we
Yeah.
see things like that. And I do think that has started in the crypto industry, and it's probably moving to software industry, and then I don't know where it stops, right? So that's kind of interesting, and I do think, you know, premier cities like Hong Kong, New York, they typically don't go on sale very often. Right now, I think Hong Kong is going on sale because I hear many expats are leaving, right? And I'm not talking about real estate. I mean, this is probably the favorite topic of people in Hong Kong and around Asia. We love talking about real estate. So Hong Kong is on sale now just from a perspective of people leaving, right? But I think it's very temporary. It's very transient, Just like New York went on sale for a little bit and then, you know, it comes back. Simply due to, you know, just there are enough of a long-term advantage and asset in that region you just cannot replicate overnight, right? And I won't even go into a head-to-head comparison Hong Kong and Singapore, because I think that idea of a free port, and I think Charles mentioned that in the beginning, that's attached to the second largest economy and probably not for long. Yes, you probably, you know, people have to psychologically get used to the new normal, whether in terms of geopolitical standing or policy. You're talking about the, you know, the level of GDP productivity and the interaction of it, you know, of China with the rest of the world. I just know that this is a temporary sale, if any. Chibo is probably thinking, I'm not getting any sale. I was thinking maybe some of the valuation come down a little bit because people are leaving. But whatever the sort of the temporary pandemic-induced dislocation will probably disappear very quickly.
Yeah. Well, I'm just waiting for Silicon Valley to go on sale.
I'm afraid we might have missed our window.
I think so. I think it was about 2 years ago when all the for rent signs were up all over my neighborhood, and a lot of moving trucks too.
That's right.
People have moved out now. I hear, well, the housing prices are sky high, but it's ridiculous. So anyhow, I'm still waiting for. So you're right. Probably missed the window. Anyhow, what about this whole Greater Bay Area concept? Does that impact how you invest and the kinds of startups that you invest? And how do you judge these Hong Kong-based startups? Do they have to have, this is kind of a multi-pronged question, do they have to have kind of a cross-border element, or do they have to have a mainland China element, or what is it that puts them over the edge, gives them an edge?
Yeah, Rebecca, before I answer that, I just kind of want to, you know, maybe take a stab at the Hong Kong Singapore, you know, topic
Okay.
that I think Melissa and Andy both kind of alluded to and kind of danced around, because maybe they have you know, a foot in both places. So, you know, political correctness is obviously you know, important. But for me, I mean, I think both my feet have been implanted in Hong Kong, and we have a separate team that handles Singapore, so they can talk about Singapore. But you know, I think from where I sit anyway, I mean, I don't see, you know, I think Singapore's done like an amazing job for what it is, right? Which is like a small, you know, standalone kind of country with not much of a, you know, population or market on its own. And, you know, in the past, when it really started to kind of push its, you know, innovation ecosystem, it was like 10 plus years ago, you know, everyone kind of used them as a springboard into the rest of Southeast Asia. But these days, I mean, you know, that's really not necessary anymore, because there are local innovation hubs within each of the large markets in Southeast Asia. And well, a lot of the entrepreneurs that want to build businesses there in those, larger markets like Indonesia, like Thailand, like Philippines, wherever it is, Vietnam, they're just going straight to those markets and starting their businesses there, right? And I think that, Hong Kong will always have something that Singapore does not, right? Which is, its backyard is China, right? And it is part of China, and it is part of that overall market. As GBA, becomes implemented more, and as GBA becomes, more of a market on its own, I think that that element of Hong Kong will only become stronger, right? Like when you get into Hong Kong, you're getting into GBA. When you're in GBA, you're in China, right? And so it's not like a springboard to anywhere. It's really part of that whole market. And I think that the speed of which Hong Kong, even if it starts early, or even if it starts later than a Singapore, right? I mean, Hong Kong will catch up much faster, right? I mean, in the race of the tortoise and the hare, I have an article coming out in HKEJ quite soon on this. I mean, it's like if Hong Kong is the tortoise in that race, right? I mean, like Singapore is nimble, it's smaller, it's more creative. Like they roll out a lot of like different policies, and they get a lot of kind of momentum in the beginning. But at the end of the day, I mean, give Hong Kong enough time, it's going to catch up, right? And I think that was true, and what Singapore has done with the innovation ecosystem, I think that's been true, and most recently in the Singapore and Hong Kong SPAC regimes, right? I mean, like Singapore rushed out its SPACs, and they had like one or two that got listed, but there's no liquidity. I mean, like there's no like very low weak pricing power, and like where do you go from here, right? I mean, like how many other SPACs are going to be wanting to list in Singapore when there are SPACs now available in Hong Kong, and there's even been more SPACs that have filed here in Hong Kong than in Singapore, right? And Hong Kong started obviously later. I mean, in terms of the startup ecosystem, there's about a dozen unicorns that have come out of Singapore, right? Over the 10 plus years that Singapore's ecosystem has been alive, with after all of the policies and all of the the infrastructure that they put in, and all the investments that Temasek GIC and the likes have made. But there's well over a dozen unicorns now in Hong Kong. And that's with just 5-6 years of innovation, and really the stakeholders putting in effort. So I think it's like yeah, I mean, Hong Kong is definitely, you can't replace it. And from the financial talent to the stock exchange to now the GBA, I mean, I think that everything is just kind of building up, and it's only going to get more exciting.
Yeah, though I think the entrepreneurial culture too, is very much alive in Hong Kong.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, yeah, there's, I guess there's still a segment of the population that, is still doesn't realize that, there is so much going on in Hong Kong. And, when you tell them that actually there's a lot of startups, there's, over a dozen unicorns, like people are like, what, really? I mean, that's Hong Kong. But, I think that they just have written off Hong Kong in their minds for so long that, they haven't taken a minute to kind of review what's been happening on the ground. And I think that there's been a number of famous investors or families here in Hong Kong that have gone on record saying they'll never invest in kind of startups here in Hong Kong, or tech out of here. But they've started to eat their words, right? So they've made some investments, and they realize that actually there's a lot going on, and there's unicorns and money to be made. So,
well, you three are real leaders in the market, and you can influence the way the market goes forward. I mean, I think your words carry a lot of weight, and I'm just thinking about when venture capital started in mainland China. It started with just a few people, and then it became a herd, and a thundering herd. We don't quite have that thundering herd today, but because it's become a lot more localized in mainland China. But these things, it does take trailblazers. It takes, like in the entrepreneurial world too, you have to have heroes. And the same thing in the VC world, you have to have people who are out there in front and leading the charge. But I think all of you have a good global perspective that you can offer to entrepreneurs who are in Hong Kong. And there was a question I wanted to bring up too. Let me get the sun out of my eyes here. It's so sunny here. Okay. There was a question that came up in the Q&A box about if you invest in Hong Kong, does it mean that you have to set up? If you get an investment from Hong Kong, does it mean that you have to set up in Hong Kong? Yeah, I don't know. What do you think about that? Chibo or anyone else who wants to answer? Chibo, since you are directly there in Hong Kong.
Yeah, I mean, I think
If
obviously. So from like a general perspective, I don't think that necessarily is the case. From a Gobi perspective, that is the case. A lot of the funds that the funds that we manage, some of them do have requirements, or the mandate of the fund is to invest in companies with a Hong Kong nexus. So whether that is, being a company headquartered here in Hong Kong, or, the company is founded by people with Hong Kong citizenship or permanent residency, or companies that are interested in building a presence here, that's how we kind of define a nexus. I mean, to be honest, I think that's probably a more stringent kind of a requirement than even the government has. But I think they're working on that. But I think for us that's definitely the case.
Andy, from Silicon Valley perspective, what do you think the view is of Hong Kong as a startup? What do you hear?
I tell you, generally, it's still not well understood, right? I think the three of us either live in the region, spend a bunch of time, or both. But I think generally it's still, there's always the lagging effect, right? I tell you usually that public opinion shifts overnight. It's a step function. And Rebecca, you mentioned this happened in China as well.
Yeah.
So in China, it happened, and it's actually not a few VCs that made it happen. It's really a few founders and CEOs that took their company public. It took the Jack Ma, Robin Lee of the world to basically let the world know that China has arrived on the stage. And I think in this case, I could think of the Yatsu of the world, who would basically help the world realize that Hong Kong has done some great things. But one Yatsu is not enough, right? You probably need three of them. And I think we're getting there, right? I think to Chibo's point, it may not be 2022, but I'd be surprised if it's beyond 2025. Public opinion usually kind of lags the reality, a few years.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. And, Yatsu is a very good spokesman for not only his company, but for Hong Kong as a startup hub. This is not only his first startup. He's been there before. And he's been through the .com period too.
Yeah, and he's got an interesting story, right? So the ups and downs, the time period he spent in the down is a lot longer than the up. So.
Yeah, so far that's true. So far that's true. Melissa, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's been pretty much, pretty well said already. So I think that, I think that we're going to see a reset in valuations globally. And I think that
it's amazing. I mean, I was doing some research on enterprise software companies, billions and billions in the billions of valuations, it's amazing.
The IPOs aren't holding up that great in the US. I mean, look at Grab, it was 40 billion, it's now 10 billion. I think there's going to be the private market valuations have exceeded the public market valuations on a ratio. And I think we're going to see a resetting of valuations globally. Now, traditionally, the US is 9 months behind the public markets. Asia's been 9 months behind the US markets to reset. And so I think at some point, if we continue to have down days of 800 points on the US markets and the Asian markets continue to be soft, the global markets just tend to be soft, and we have a recession, I think that'll drive valuations to a more normalized level, but that's okay. That's actually good in many ways if you take a long-term view of venture. What's interesting is that the challenges that we're facing globally today are much more structural than they were in the past. And so I think what we're going to see is this is really interesting because historically, if you look at venture capital in 2000, it was mostly the US. You look at the numbers recently, the US only represents 49% of all venture capital deployed.
Yes.
It's a much more global business.
Yeah.
And so I think everybody thought we'd get balkanization, but we'd have it with global trade. And I think what we're seeing is balkanization of the world with global trade being interrupted. What does that mean? It means that the regional venture capital is going to become stronger. The opportunities are going to be much more regional. And I think that it'll create new opportunities that probably didn't exist when you had global companies who could play that role. I think those days are over with for quite some time. So that speaks very favorably for startups, that are addressing the Asian markets and are addressing some of the, what I would say is the interruption that we've seen now from two ways. One being COVID and the impact of COVID on the global economy, but number two is the war that we're seeing with Russia and Ukraine, right? Supply chains are interrupted, flight patterns are interrupted. And that just is going to create new opportunities for Hong Kong as an example and for the region.
Yeah, a lot of new logistics startups all over Asia.
Rightfully so. I mean, I think all of a sudden the world woke up and realized their shelves are empty because of supply chain issues, or you can't get enough semiconductors for cars. So this is all positive for venture capital, because in periods of transformation is when there's opportunities. It's only when you have stagnated periods of innovation is it more difficult, but there will be a reckoning with valuations. I think it's inevitable at this point in time. It's just a question of how much. There's a lot of cash in the system. It'll take time to work through, but you got to have a normalized return. You can't go in the public markets and have down rounds to private rounds. It doesn't last long. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. I mean, just looking at the venture capital trends in the US last year, it just exploded. And the valuations too. So many new unicorns. But I think
being a unicorn doesn't really matter anymore.
Yeah, right. A decacorn. It's like, oh, yeah, I've lost all perspective. $1 trillion, okay. So,
yeah.
Okay. Anyhow, there's another question here, and I think it's a good question about the COVID cases and what the consequences of this, China keeping the zero cases, what the consequences are for that, attracting international investors in the short term. Good question. Thank you for that. Anyone care to answer? Impact of the
So if I can, I'm probably the least qualified person when it comes to these medical issues. But I just look at it, if our investments are, 5-10 year horizon, this is just a blip. So I gotta imagine somebody, much higher pay grade in the government to figure it out. Or if they don't figure it out, Mother Nature will figure it out. And then from our perspective, it will be a kind of a non-event, if you will, right? I kind of look at the decisions we made 2 years ago during the pandemic, which is to keep investing. That turned out to be a good decision because we didn't know what was going to happen to the market or anything, the society. But in fact, most people probably disagree with what the U.S. government decided to do with COVID handling, but it seemed to have worked out okay, right? I think if you go back to the time, you probably could have made it even better. But imagine how badly we handle COVID, but where we end up, it doesn't seem, I wouldn't say it's great, but it seems to be acceptable from an investment perspective. Now, if you take that and apply to the Chinese policies, let's say they made some grave mistakes, it probably comes out okay in 3-4 years, maybe even in 2 years, it works out. In the meantime, it's probably a little bit painful. So it really is your investment horizon. If you're a venture investor, oftentimes you can weather this kind of uncertainties. It really is about when these good assets go on sale, you don't want to let fear drive your decision, right? So Melissa said there'll probably be a reckoning of valuation. When things go down that badly, that is actually when you want to just keep investing through.
Right. So you're gearing up for that.
Well, I
Yeah,
think that's right. I think Andy's right. Like, yeah, down markets are a great time to great opportunity time to invest. That's the best time. I mean, some of the best companies have been built in down markets. So I think it's actually quite exciting because like, when it's only going one direction, it's nice, but it's challenging when companies are getting marked up 5x round around. I think what we really care about is building great companies and seeing returns from that.
Yeah, and I would add in the down market, 3 things happened, right? Most people would just sort of jump on, especially our audience may say, well, these investors just want to pay lower valuation. But that's not it, right? Because we're in that valuation together. In fact, we're minority shareholders. It's good that you as founders sit on a valuation where you could keep building up, right? Imagine if you get a huge run in the top of the market and then the market crashes, you have to go raise money at a down round. That's very difficult, right? So in a way, in the down market, a few things happen. The valuation adjusts to a natural level. Number 2 is that a lot of these big companies will start firing people, right? They just restructure, and it's a great time for you to recruit some great team members. And number 3, well, what I have found is that it really is good for everybody in the down market. You have the opportunistic startups that kind of just disappear, right? The people who are still remaining committed to raise money to pursue their mission, those are the people you want to back. And so in a way, you have less competition as a founder. So in a way, if it does happen in a recession, something that had a valuation adjustment, it's not all bad. And it's not just great for the investors. Actually, it's a natural phenomenon. It will continue to happen, and don't let a crisis go to waste.
Right. So in this high valuation era right now, does that make it a lot more difficult for you to get in there and compete against, say, a Sequoia or something?
Probably a lot harder for everyone to go in there, because then it's not greed driving the investment, it's the fear, right? You wonder if it's going to get even worse. Maybe I'll just wait another 6 months. Valuation will drop another 20%.
Oh, okay. All right, Chipo, did you want to say anything else, or not?
I mean, no. I mean, I agree with Andy and Melissa. In the last 2.5 years, we've probably deployed the most capital of any time period that we've been here in Hong Kong. So, we've been super active during COVID. I think with regards to the question, maybe more from a startup perspective as well. As we look at our portfolio and the impact that COVID-0 has had on them, obviously I think we're at a different time within the pandemic now. Hong Kong is kind of just getting past its 5th wave, starting to open up again. We just got reinstated into dinners past 6 p.m. So it is gradually starting to open up. China, on the other hand, is going into like a very serious kind of 2nd, 3rd wave. With full city lockdown in Shanghai, and full city lockdown starting in Beijing as of this week as well. So I think that that has had a significant impact on a lot of the supply chain issues that Melissa was alluding to earlier. A lot of the e-commerce companies that we had that have warehouses, logistics stops within Shanghai, those have been fully stopped, immobilized, right? And so nothing is able to be shipped out, nothing is able to be shipped in. So I think a lot of these policies, especially more recently on the mainland, have been disruptive to the startup's normal course of business. But that being said, I definitely do agree with Andy that it would be a short-term kind of a thing. But it does force a lot of the entrepreneurs and companies on the ground here to think about diversification of geography and of talent. I think that with the immobilization of supply chain in China, like some of these companies are starting to set up warehouses and logistics in Japan, right, in Korea, in Taiwan. They're looking to diversify their supply chain so that they're not caught with all their eggs in one basket with COVID zero in China. That being and in that same vein, I mean, in terms of talent distribution, I mean, they're also being much more mindful. And so, with pandemic, obviously everyone's gotten more comfortable with working from home, working through Zoom. So, the distributed team is also a real thing now, right? I mean, so people have developers scattered all over the region, some in other regions completely. And they're finding ways to work around that and find an effective way to do business. So I think that there are short-term consequences from the COVID zero lockdowns. There are long-term consequences of working abroad and remotely. But I think it's probably no different here than it is anywhere else in the world. Maybe China is just much more effective at their lockdown policies. But other than that, I mean, it's roughly the same.
Okay, no, I'm just thinking
Can I
about
just say that
Yeah.
that was great, because I made a bunch of hand waving arguments and Chibo actually has some data to back it up. That's great. I do want to add on to that and say that these obstacles that he was describing, one thing I forget to mention is that the key is to have a long runway, right? So here we are. I was talking about a 5-10 year investment horizon. That's assumed you could survive that long. So I think if we could dole out one advice for our entrepreneurial friends in the audience is that it may feel like, hey, the market is on a downward spiral, but it's still a great time to fundraise. If you can raise money now, you should do it, right? Because I wouldn't say nuclear winter is coming, but something's coming. So even if you raise money now, you think, oh, valuation was so much higher last year, just raise money because you'll need it just in case something happens. I mean, Chibo cited some really good examples of economy getting shut down. The US looks great now. I mean, who knows? We might have a shutdown in the fall or winter, just like last year, right? So just try to raise money when you can. And capital is still pretty cheap, right? Melissa just cited some, record valuations. So why not just capitalize it? You may not want to spend it, but this is a great time to fundraise.
That's good advice, I think. But let's leave it at that. And let's thank our wonderful panelists, Melissa, Andy, and Chibo. A lot of good advice there, a lot of wisdom. Sorry, we can't talk longer, but and also thank you from the audience for those 2 terrific questions. Really appreciate that too. We're going to be moving into our next segment of the show, which is our economic perspective from the Bay Area Council, and a Bay to Bay talk, which will be really interesting, I think, because we'll get the Silicon Valley perspective or San Francisco Bay Area perspective and the other Bay Area perspective from Hong Kong and the regions of Southern China. So we'll get to have a really good introduction to this whole topic, I think, from Sean coming up there. And I see Sean here now. So thank you again, Melissa, Chico, Andy, really great. And
Thank you.
yeah, we'll talk again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I need to, hello, Sean, how are you?
Hey, Rebecca, I'm great. How are you?
Good, good. I'm going to be bringing up your slides in a moment.
Thank you very much.
I think I have to stop share these first. Okay. Here we are.
That looks familiar.
Okay. So now, as it says here, the topic is Bay to Bay, China's Greater Bay Area Plan and Synergies for San Francisco Bay Area and U.S. Business. This is a really comprehensive report that the Bay Area Economic Institute undertook with a huge amount of data in here that Sean is going to take us through. So I'm going to try to keep up with Sean as he talks and move the slides forward. So Sean, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Rebecca. Let's do it.
Okay.
So, by the way, these are just the high points. I'm not going to give you reams of data, but if you want to find the report, there's a lot of data in the report. So you can dig in there if you want to. So we started to look at this question a couple of years ago, and especially last year, because we know it's a big deal in China, but the Greater Bay Area idea is very poorly understood, if it's even recognized in much of the US. So we wanted to be able to kind of interpret, especially for US audiences, like what is this all about? And is it a big deal or not? And what kind of opportunities are available there? So I think the key point to start is it's a national strategy of China. There are other so-called Bay Areas in China that could at some point or another also be recognized as official Bay Areas. You know, people want to promote this idea in Hangzhou Bay and Bohai Bay, but this is the only one that's officially recognized in Chinese government policy. At the highest level, its execution is under the NDRC at the vice premier level. It's embedded in the 14th five-year plan. So this is an official government policy, unlike the others. At its origin, it's very loosely modeled after the San Francisco Bay Area as a multi-jurisdictional integrated place, a regional economy that concentrates production and innovation assets. And it builds on the Pearl River Delta's historical role as a global trading center and as a really testing bed for economic reforms in China generally. So it's not a huge surprise that the government decided to run this program in the Pearl River Delta and take the whole idea to another level. Thinking about the similarities of the San Francisco Bay Area, it has a high income, like $19,400 per capita, which is pretty high, almost $2 trillion GDP. The big difference is it has a lot of manufacturing that we don't anymore, and it's 22,000 square miles, which is a lot bigger than our Bay Area here. So thinking about the strategic goals, why is China pursuing this? One is clearly to connect and integrate the economies of Hong Kong and Macau with 9 cities in Guangdong province. You can see in the map there, it's not all of Guangdong province, but it's 9 cities in the province. And it's aiming to leverage the unique assets of each jurisdiction. Vis-a-vis Hong Kong and Macau in particular, there's another goal to sort of deepen the integration of Hong Kong and Macau into the Chinese economy. So one country, two system is a very big part of this. And then also the goal is to connect the Pearl River Delta region more deeply to the rest of the world as a global innovation hub. And that connects to things like Belt and Road. Next slide. So there are a number of tools the government has been developing here. One is there's a large scale investment in infrastructure. So these are airports, roads, bridges, light rail, high-speed rail, a whole suite of infrastructure projects designed to integrate the transportation system and make it more efficient to move people and goods around the region. There's a parallel set of initiatives that are really economic development ones, which are aiming through regulatory processes to make it easier for people and capital and goods to move more freely on the infrastructure. So this is a regulatory angle, and this is sort of harmonization. And then there's a third component of investing a lot in science and science infrastructure to really up the game around innovation. So there's a theme here around linking urban zones. So you've got these big urban zones and clusters, and how do you link them to each other? So at one level, they're linking the core cities of Hong Kong, Shenzhen, Guangzhou with each other, and then with node cities. So linking Hong Kong with Shenzhen more strongly, Guangzhou with Foshan, Macau with Shanghai. Leveraging, say, technology in Shenzhen and entrepreneurship, manufacturing in Guangzhou, services in Hong Kong, and seeing what you could do with those different combinations. And then deepening the connection of Hong Kong's economy with the mainland. So it's based on proximity, complementary advantages. There is a big role here around science, Hong Kong Science Park, Hong Kong Shenzhen Innovation and Technology Park, Guangzhou AI and Digital Economy Pilot Zone, a whole range of investments in the scientific infrastructure. And then there's, I guess you'd say, regulatory experimentation going on. So these are different legal jurisdictions. It's kind of like the San Francisco Bay Area. We have 101 cities and 9 counties, and they barely talk to each other. So how do you make it work together? So recognizing those jurisdictional differences, they're playing around with things like cross-border small business permits, personal bank accounts in dual currencies, shared driver's licenses. And part of this idea is not just within the Greater Bay Area, but it's also seeing if the Greater Bay Area can be a prototype for other Bay Areas that might evolve in China. So it really kind of goes back to the creation of Shenzhen decades ago as a laboratory for experimentation and maybe a model for the rest of the country. So when we get to the role of Hong Kong, it's really a big deal for Hong Kong. It's integral to the entire plan. And I think Hong Kong sees much of its economic future as being tied to the Greater Bay Area plan. So if we look at kind of the unique strengths, like what role does Hong Kong play? What does it bring into this mix? You know, obviously, in ways you do not see elsewhere in the Greater Bay Area, Asia Pacific headquarters, International Business Services Center, real strengths in things like media, advertising, professional and financial services, global consulting. Big strength, needless to say, in financial services, capital markets, renminbi financing, IPOs, one of the top 5 centers globally for IPOs and the leading regional financial center in Asia. I think something else that distinguishes it from the rest of the region, needless to say, is the common law system, the system of contracts, IP protection, commercial dispute settlement, which brings sort of transparency, predictability for investors. And then you have the innovation part, highly respected universities, good R&D infrastructure, Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, Hong Kong Polytechnic, a lot of capacity there to generate startups and really advance innovation. And then you have the angle with Hong Kong as well, of course, of Chinese companies going out, you know, through Hong Kong. So really a unique role within the region, and that really distinguishes the Greater Bay Area concept from any other Bay Area concept that might evolve elsewhere in China because of the unique characteristics of Hong Kong you don't find elsewhere in China. So this is not completely cooked yet. It's a work in progress. And there's a bunch of questions out there. One is, you know, will the whole of the Greater Bay Area be more than the sum of its parts? Because, you know, you already have the Pearl River Delta. It's been a global economic region for a very, very long time. So will the Greater Bay Area, through these investments and initiatives, be something more than that? There is collaboration. There's also competition between the jurisdictions. And again, these are different legal entities, you know, between Hong Kong and Shenzhen and Guangzhou. So that has to be worked out. And then there's more geopolitical tensions that kind of come into play. If we were talking 5 or 6 or 8 years ago, this would not have been the case so much. But, you know, the reality is this is happening in an environment of growing US tensions around technology. I think it makes investment in technology, say from the US, a little more difficult than it would have been in the past. And you have the issues surrounding the national security law and how it's being implemented in Hong Kong. Also, I think, raising some new issues around global business and American business in the region, which is not just on the Chinese side, but actually, I think affects what's happening in Hong Kong as well. So I think at the bottom line, looking at the potential here, and I'll just mention the San Francisco Bay Area connection, because that's where we started. So here we have really deep ties with Guangdong province. So most of the Chinese immigrants here actually came from the province. San Francisco and Hong Kong are both global service centers. They're anchor cities for the region. Again, we are looking at these restraints around technology cooperation, which means we sort of need to thread a needle here, at least as we perceive it at the Economic Institute, to identify areas where cooperation is promising and will run into the fewest possible political barriers, because we have to admit there's a lot more now than in the past. So we were able to identify some really promising fields. Climate change is one. Clean energy is another. Healthcare, we're dealing with aging population, so there's a lot going on around there. Electric and autonomous vehicles, biomedicine, pharmaceuticals, and of course, fintech being a huge opportunity, and really looking at the Greater Bay Area as a gigantic laboratory for fintech innovation, with a lot of that coming out of Hong Kong. And I think that's coming to the last slide, which is where do we see the potential, especially looking at it from a US or overseas standpoint. So I think the Greater Bay Area uniquely concentrates several really important things. Manufacturing capacity, like nowhere in the world, comparable to Guangdong province. Technology, especially in Shenzhen, but in Hong Kong as well. And this enormous global service space that you find especially in Hong Kong. And then the financial system of Hong Kong, with its legal system, its global openness, which really distinguishes the Greater Bay Area from the rest of China, and it's a much more cosmopolitan environment for investing and for expats as well. The political uncertainties are real. I don't think we put them under the rug, but my impression is that, at least at the moment, they don't directly impact business operations in a way that would discourage business activity or investment, as long as you're aware of where the sensitivities are around technology and technology transfer. And whatever may happen, whether this becomes an enormous thing that delivers on the promises or something else, there is going to be a long-term legacy of investment, just massive investment in the infrastructure, in the science, which means Pearl River Delta is already a very important place globally for investment. One way or the other, we think it's going to be even more important in the future. So if you want more detail, you can just dig in the report. There's all the detail on this you would ever want to find, and probably more.
Yes, I know there are a lot of stats to back all this up too. So somebody just asked if the slides would be available afterwards. So yeah, I think so, right, John?
Absolutely.
And you have plenty more as well, don't you?
Oh, yes, indeed. And at bayareaeconomy.org is our website. You go on the publications page, you can just download the full report. There's no charge for anything we do. It's all for the public.
Okay, and the website again would be?
Really simple, www.bayareaeconomy.org. Okay,
very good. Very good. So everyone, I hope that you got that. And thank you, Sean. That was really great. I enjoyed moving along here with you with these wonderful slides as well.
Thank you for moving the slides, by the way. I would have messed it up.
Okay. It was no problem at all. Great graphics too. All right, now let's move on, and please keep sending in your questions as we go along. Let's see if there's any other ones for, okay. Here's a real good compliment for you, Sean. Okay, this is on the valuation question that we raised in the last panel. Sorry we didn't get to that one in time on the valuation issue. You know, we have regular VC series, so please tune in to our regular shows. We do an Ask a VC show about every other week with leading VCs, and this is also, you know, a big topic for them. Sean, any other further comments you'd like to make about, are you positive about this? You're real positive about this whole Greater Bay Area concept, right?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to it. As I said, you already have the program built. You had Hong Kong, you had Shenzhen. It's not like this is virgin territory, but the level of investment going into it, and especially the initiatives around legal harmonization, reducing barriers to not only goods moving around the region with the upgraded infrastructure, but also to people moving within the region. So the idea theoretically is you could go anywhere within the region within an hour if this is fully delivered. And so, you know, that means issues around customs and passports and hukou, employment. All that stuff has to be addressed, and it's not very simple to do. But if they're successful, it really does bind it together as a even more meaningful economic region. And then you just look at the scale, kind of the diversity between the manufacturing capacity in Guangdong province and sort of the entrepreneurs and the technology companies in Shenzhen, and then the enormous service base and financial industry in Hong Kong, and the technology and startups that are coming out of Hong Kong, especially in fintech, then that you really have something there. So again, I think we have this framework of US-China relations that makes it sort of a complicated landscape for a technology company wanting to go in. But as we looked into it, you know, as I said, we found a number of areas that are promising where the barriers that are on the ground shouldn't really discourage people from looking at those opportunities carefully.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much. Good summary. All
Thanks,
right.
Rebecca.
All right, good. Thank you, Sean. Now we're going to move right on to our FinTech Innovation Panel. So FinTech people, turn your cameras on. Kelvin, Arnold.
Hello.
And where's
Hey,
Elsa?
Rebecca.
Hi. Okay, so we have Kelvin from Acumen.
Yes.
Okay, and we have Arnold from Airwallex. And we did have Elsa, and now Elsa is back from Blue Onion, all one word, Blue Onion. So I think the point of this panel is we've already heard a lot about how Hong Kong is a great fintech hub. There's a lot of innovation going on. There's the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. There's a lot of stuff happening around crypto and blockchain. So this panel is to just do a deeper dive into each one of your companies and your place in Hong Kong, why you're in Hong Kong, what do you get out of it, what's your particular innovation that you have in finance. So why don't we start, Arnold, with you. Airwallex, I think, is the biggest company of you're representing the biggest company of the three here, or of the three organizations here. And so tell us a little bit about what Airwallex does. I know it's all about remittances. So what's the innovative part of it, and why are you in Hong Kong?
Sure. Hi, morning, everyone. Hi, Rebecca. My name is Arnold. So I manage kind of SME and growth business across Hong Kong and Singapore for Airwallex. So Airwallex is actually a global fintech platform. Our mission is basically to empower and connect all the entrepreneurs, business owners, to basically empower them to operate their business around every corner of the world. We've built our own financial infrastructure, our proprietary financial infrastructure, so that all business owners of all sizes can basically move money around the world in a very fast and efficient manner. So Hong Kong obviously is our international launch pad. I manage the Hong Kong business, and basically in just last year, Hong Kong has been a market for us in terms of launching a lot of new products. Like we launched our kind of card issuing product last year. We also launched our kind of payment acceptance last year as well. So basically, Hong Kong has been quite an important hub for us, where our infrastructure basically empower a lot of not only local businesses, but also overseas businesses that have shops in Hong Kong to basically manage their finance and basically pay their suppliers, pay their contractors out of Hong Kong. So that's basically it. And Airwallex has been around for since 2015. Right now, we have 19 locations around the world with over 1,000 employees.
Oh, and your company is one of those unicorns, isn't it?
Yeah, we actually were founded in 2015, and right now we're our Series C company. We're also invested by a lot of great investors, some based in Hong Kong, including Chibo from Gobi Partners. Yeah.
But Airwallex is a unicorn, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Right now
okay.
we're valued at $5.5 billion.
I'm sorry, what was the valuation?
$5 billion, $5.5 billion.
Wow. Well, I think we were talking about high valuations before, but your company really has grown very fast, hasn't it? And particularly during this whole pandemic.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is that we actually started as a coffee shop. Our founders basically started as a coffee shop, and we realized, just like other business owners, our founders realized how hard it is to basically do the day-to-day business for a small business. And that's why we actually built the financial infrastructure to empower other business owners to kind of do their business across the world as well.
That's a great story. It's a really good anecdote. Good advice for anybody, any entrepreneur who was listening in there. You hear how effective that anecdote was for his company. Just keep that in mind when you're pitching. These anecdotes really help to illustrate. Okay, let's move on to Calvin now, and tell us about Acumen. Empower every investor is what your slide says. So tell us about that.
Yeah, thank you, Rebecca. It's my pleasure to be here. My name is Calvin Lei. I'm CEO and co-founder of Acumen. We are a Hong Kong fintech company which is dedicated ourselves into wealth tech. So in the past 5 years, our story is that we started as a company from the library of HKUST, a university in Hong Kong. So me and Dr. Huang, we want to use data and the algorithm to help majority of the investors to achieve a better and faster asset allocation investment in the future. And our business model is we provide our SaaS model to connect to large institutions such as banks, insurance companies, securities brokers, and then we can empower their end clients, their retail clients. So in the past 5 years, we probably serve more than 1 million people in GBA area, and also achieved a very good performance along the way.
Okay, and your original investment was from Cyberport, right?
Yeah, it was back in 2020. Cyberport, Lenovo, and the other investors invest in us.
Okay, and was that without Cyberport, would you have made it?
Yeah, I think in the past 5 years we have been supported by a lot of investors who think the wealth tech is the future for majority of the people now, because of the fractional shares, because of the electronic trading platforms, even in cryptos. We see more and more investors coming into financial markets. Now in the world, it's 330 million people who can invest. So we are closing the gap between this very mass market and the shortage of the service from the institutions.
And you're the founder, right? So how did you get the idea for this? You had a
Yeah.
lot of wealth that you didn't know what to do with.
Yeah, actually, my background is I entered this financial industry back in 2008. Just right before financial crisis, and I was selling derivatives in fixed income departments in investment bank. So I stayed there for almost 10 years, and I have seen all the things happen right after the financial crisis. So I want to do something. First is in line with clients' interest in longer term, right? That is not derivatives, that is not high leveraged or black box. You must use a very transparent and low cost way to serve your clients. And the second way is to use some of the technologies, right? I don't just have some idea other people can copy. So I find my co-founder, Dr. Huang, he's a PhD in mathematics. And so we developed a lot of the algorithms and applications for the investors that they can, invest easily, break through all the channels, all the middle layers, and have the, the most scientific and the best Sharpe ratio investment in the future.
So who is it designed for?
Yeah, we designed this system, back in 2016 with a bunch of PhDs. Our company, is famous for, the largest algo team in Asia in terms of investment management system. We got almost 60 people in the team and more than 15 PhDs.
Right. So, but your product, your service itself, who is it designed for? Is it for somebody, they have to be in Hong Kong? Does it matter? Does it matter how much money they have? Who is it designed for?
Yeah, we designed the product mainly for mass market. So that is, mass market, that is less than 100,000 US dollars. Usually in the banks, they have no people to cover them. Even they are covered by sales or just selling some product. So we have this automatic platform that is offered to the mass market. That's how it is designed.
And what is it, a subscription kind of thing, or what's the model?
Yeah, the model, yes, it's a SaaS model, so the people can subscribe the service and they can have their, best matched portfolio tailor-made for them every time they want to allocate their portfolio. Yeah.
I see. Good. All right, Elsa, thank you for patiently waiting there. What did you think about Airwallex and Acumen?
I think these guys are great. It's all the innovation came from the demand, right? There's a gap in the market and no one's filling it, and that's how innovators come into the picture and started using their expertise, vertical expertise, and applying that using technology as an enabler. I think these guys are great. Like Kelvin, he is a seasoned investment veteran. And Arnold is young enough to think out of the box, to dream wild, right? So it's a perfect combination.
Yeah, maybe they should team up and start a company together. They should combine their companies. Yeah,
they should
I'm
become
just
a
kidding.
serial
I'm just kidding.
entrepreneur.
So, all right. Well, what are your goals with Blue Onion?
Well,
and how did you come up with that name, anyhow?
To be quite honest, we came up with the name and then we try to justify it. I study criminal justice. So to me, blue is more of an investigation, blue cops kind of thing. My brand agency says blue sky, both worked for me, either way. So onion, it's peeling layer after layer, right?
Yeah.
So that's exactly what we do, because when we started, we actually started, it's a spin-off from our a very mature business called Benchmark. It's Wealth Asia Media that runs a 25-year-old financial publication out of Hong Kong. So as we were growing, we conducted a lot of due diligence on the asset managers, and we have the buy side, who are the family offices and the banks, working with us, building metrics and criteria in assessing these managers. So very soon we realized that there's not such a product in the market at the moment that really helps us streamline the process, right? So if you go into a bank, you try to buy a mutual fund, you really don't understand the entire supply chain or the value chain, how everything comes about, right? You're just taking the words from the advisors for granted. So you don't really know what the ingredients that are used to cook, for this recipe. So we wanted to drill down and apply very meticulous and metrics into the process, trying to understand the stewardship of these asset managers, thereby helping the buy side for the onboarding process, and also helping the sell side, who are the product managers themselves, to understand, their position, in terms of carbon exposures, in terms of their underlying investees, whether or not it's exposed to Russia at the moment, or it's exposed to any of the terrorism, lending, et cetera, et cetera. So we dive very deep into the companies, helping both the buy and the sell side who wants to make an impact, such as climate change or social justice, and more importantly, to avoid negative impact. So we have a physical and a transition climate change trends going on right now. So every financial institution is to be aware of their exposures and their investment portfolios that have those exposures.
Okay.
I hope
That's
I haven't
good.
confused your audience.
Is your group, is it your organization, it's membership based?
It is. We have
Okay.
both single membership solutions, and we also have bespoke enterprise solutions. So if a bank says we only carry these 200-300 funds, can you build out a customized solution for us so that our high net worth individuals can have a turnkey solution to build a values aligned portfolio? So, optimizing carbon exposures, avoiding cigarettes, avoiding animal cruelty, et cetera, in a click of a button, which is
I
quite convenient.
see. I see. Okay, so why don't, since we have 3 entrepreneurs represented here, why don't you each talk about your journey as an entrepreneur? Do you like being an entrepreneur, or is it more challenging than you thought? Would you do it again? Kelvin, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think back in 2016, the market, no matter it's, the startups or the VCs in Hong Kong is pretty in a very early stage. We started in the library, only 2 people, and then moved to a village house near the university in Clearwater Bay. And then, we stayed there almost for 3 years, and then come back to Hong Kong Island and serve for more institutions. But I think it's a very happy, journey during the first 3 years. And then, when we enter into the real deal with connecting with institutions, now we have more than 100 institutions. Things have become more and more, even fascinating, right? Because we have a lot of projects going on, and we are solving the most toughest, problems in the industry. We talk to the clients, even we need to persuade the regulators about this, right? Because in the past, in the early stage, it's a new product, and now we can persuade the regulators, SFC, that every institution should have this, right? You should provide the most scientific and most advanced portfolio investment tools to end clients. So it's not easy, right? It's not easy, but very, very fruitful past 5 years for me.
It's very rewarding. Okay. All right. And Arnold, how about you?
Sure. Basically, I think for Airwallex, the whole company started in Melbourne. Like in terms of the journey, we started off from a coffee shop, build our kind of global financial kind of transfer infrastructure, and then we realized the need for business, and then we actually built a card issuing business and also the acquiring business. So I think my role helping the business to kind of start a Hong Kong business, it's just like running a startup within a startup. I think it's very exciting because I think Airwallex, it's definitely a company where we're full of innovators. We're also empowering founders and innovators. So we're actually working very closely with the startup community in Hong Kong as well. I do think the journey of Airwallex, not just a company journey, but our journey in Hong Kong, and just last year, it was very exciting. Like I previously mentioned, in Hong Kong last year, we've launched 2 major new product lines in Hong Kong, where we empower businesses to use our virtual card to pay expenses all around the world. We also empower businesses to accept card online through our acquiring business. And last year has been amazing, where we built a team from scratch in Hong Kong in terms of the commercial team. And then we basically kind of work with a lot of like entrepreneurs and founders as well. And it's very exciting because like we are basically the backbone and financial operating system for a lot of startups as well. So we're kind of like a startup within a startup, but at the same time also empowering other startups to grow with us.
Yeah, that's good. I like that description. So well put. Elsa, have you always been an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I've always been an entrepreneur from day one.
I don't know how I knew that, but I knew that.
I don't know any other ways. Yeah. So since the first day out of college, I started becoming an entrepreneur. I started investing in real estate and all that. So it was a very exhausting journey every day. But it's very enjoyable. My personality is quite rebellious, so I can't see myself working for a big organization, wasting time on red tapes and bureaucracy. No offense to the big corps, but it's just, we are a very friendly environment that enables entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship. So everyone within the companies, they're welcome to express their ideas, bounce ideas back and forth each other, and then come in with innovation as a group. So we're based in Hong Kong, but territories have never been an issue for us. So even our group company is set up in Cayman, where our operating hub is here. And we have a setup in UK, in Singapore, and Taiwan. So these are very, very friendly cultures that we like to bring, that are very, very much aligned with our mission-driven sustainability endeavors.
Okay. So how are the current issues in Hong Kong impacting your business? We've talked a little bit about that before. Certainly the quarantines, the flight problems, also some political issues. How are these issues impacting the way you run your business?
I actually am very grateful for the world coming to a stop for a few years. I think, like Melissa mentioned earlier in the panel, it has not been disruptive at all. It's actually the fact that I didn't have to travel for 2.5 years. Actually, when I'm grounded, I'm able to do more. And I think Zoom is actually very, very effective. Zoom or any other VCs platforms. So I think being an entrepreneur, you have to be adaptive. Whenever there's a crisis, you'll be able to manage. And then you have to get into a new norm that's always happening every year, or every other day. There's a new norm coming. So we have to be, equipped to deal with these crises.
Right. Any comment on this topic, Kelvin or Arnold?
Actually, for us, like having like kind of COVID and also basically the lockdown actually changed in terms of how entrepreneurs and business owners think about their business, which to our business actually on a kind of more positive trajectory. Like pre-COVID, no one would think about, like at least in Hong Kong, such a trading hub, there's a lot of like brick and mortar SMEs and startups, right? Pre-COVID, like very few of them would think about selling online or selling overseas. And because of COVID, like they really have to rethink, can they still rely on the traditional like financial infrastructure? Can they still send their secretaries to write checks and queue up at the bank branches? And because of lockdown, because of COVID, they actually rethink a lot in terms of how they operate business. Do they still want to use a traditional way, or do they want to rely on kind of more digital native partner like ourselves to kind of manage their finance, especially with like kind of the markets becoming more globalized under COVID, especially moving a lot of the e-commerce, a lot of the kind of selling online. A lot of the traditional brick and mortar shops who have like physical shops are actually coming to us and say, oh, can you work with us to build our online store? Can you empower us to basically import stuff from suppliers all over the world and also sell them locally or sell them to like other consumers around the region? So I do think lockdown and COVID definitely changed a lot in terms of business owners and how they're going to operate their business. And for kind of digital native partners or service providers like ourselves, I do think it's definitely very positive in terms of our growth trajectory.
Okay, good. Yeah, silver lining there. Okay, Kelvin.
Yeah, very interesting because we are our industry is in the investment side. So last year we launched the first portfolio that for the retail clients in Hong Kong that we put a Bitcoin ETF into the portfolio. So this is, I think this
Sorry,
is
you put what in the portfolio?
Into our robo-advisor portfolio. We put a Bitcoin into our global asset allocation as a new asset class. Yeah, it's a very innovative way to give the young investors a method to tap into the crypto assets. And last year the crypto world has been like growing very, very fast, and we do see a lot of investors, especially Gen Z, and they think it's a big opportunity for them. And yeah, I think under this circumstances, because of the inflation, of the tension, the war in Europe, and the other things, people tend to rely more and more on the crypto world, on Web3, on decentralized metaverse, this kind of thing. And I think in the future, it's going to be a really big thing in terms of the financial market and also even to the society of the human.
All right, very good. I wish we had more time, but I think you gave us a good picture of the issues facing fintech innovators in Hong Kong and why you're in Hong Kong as well. So thank you very much, Elsa, Kelvin, and Arnold. And I hope to see you in person, maybe for this whole Start Me Up Hong Kong festival that's coming up in September. So let's see. And that gives me a good segue to Jane Chan, who's been waiting here to give us a wrap up for today. And Jane, do you want to come on now? Oh, good. Hi, Jane. How are you?
Hi, Rebecca. Hi, I'm good. Thank you.
Good. So Jane is with Invest Hong Kong, and she actually runs the Start Me Up Hong Kong Festival, and which is coming up September. So I think she wants to tell us a little bit more what that program's all about.
Yeah, thank you ever so much, Rebecca. It's been a fantastic program. I've really enjoyed listening to the various panelists and speakers today. And for everyone else who's on, if all this discussion about what's happening on the ground in Hong Kong, the GBA actually, and also some of the, by extension, the discussions on Asia. One way to actually get to know Hong Kong a little bit more are through the events. And, one of the silver linings, of course, of the whole COVID situation is that there's that the whole virtual aspect of events is something that we all got used to. And going forward, it'll probably still be something, that will be ongoing. I think once we've actually, had the convenience and the international exposure, I think this is going to be something that keeps going, and certainly that's going to be the case with the Start Me Up Hong Kong Festival. We are running this 1 week event in September, 5th to the 10th of September. And what it is that it's a week of events focused on actually different sectors and industries. And if you're in that kind of space, it's a great way for you to actually get exposed to, some of the discussions, innovations happening directly in that industry, but also within the region as well. So obviously, sometimes fintech, what's been driven out of Hong Kong, out of Asia, may be different. That's going to come out of New York, San Francisco. So we really invite you to attend. We've got the GBA Innovation Summit on day one. And that's where you actually learn a little bit more about, what those big tech companies in mainland China are actually saying. The actual event is going to be bilingual, but there's simultaneous translation. So you actually get it straight from the horse's mouth. I think sometimes, a lot of the information coming out of, the mainland kind of companies sometimes gets filtered, gets translated. A media also takes a different take. But I think when you talk to the actual founders themselves, you get a good view about what's happening on the ground, the challenges that they're seeing, as well as the opportunities. So the GBA Innovation Summit is happening. We've got a massive sustainability kind of thread that's also running through the Start Me Up Hong Kong Festival. We've got the 1.5C, which is obviously focused on climate change and some of the technologies and issues that is going to be discussed and also showcased through that as well. We've got health tech as well for any kind of like biotech companies, digital tech, digital health companies, and that's happening on the day two. So the Asia Healthcare Innovation Summit, it will be a sort of like a marriage of with the more traditional kind of large medical pharmaceutical companies with innovation, the startups and tech. So I think there's going to be some really good discussions there. The Scale Up Impact Summit, it's going to run between the 6th and the 7th of September. That is a very large kind of conference, and that's going to touch on a lot of different areas that might be of interest to startups. So there's areas for pitching, there's job fairs, there's investment panels, there's actually investor one-to-one meetings as well, for people that are interested. But there's actually a very big metaverse kind of thread running through. In fact, I think it's going to be the virtual aspect is going to be broadcast through one of the metaverse worlds. I'll let the organizers talk about that a little bit more later.
It sounds exciting.
Yeah, no, it is. It's all the whole avatar and checking out different kind of activities happening at different stages. So it will be fun, I think. We've got Asia Prop Tech as well happening. So property tech is a big thing here in Hong Kong, as you can probably imagine. A lot of Hong Kong is focused on properties and real estate. And, we've got some really, really big developers here that are jumping in with both feet. And I think on the Prop Tech event, we're going to see some really interesting discussions coming out of there and some learnings as to what kind of technology these companies are adopting in order to try and reach customers, streamline operations, and all these kind of things that they have to do because of the pandemic as well. It's forcing a lot of these real estate companies' hands, actually. So I think we're going to see some of that being showcased. We've got an event called Game On. So Game On stands for it's gaming, it's art, it's music and digital entertainment. And, there's going to be some great discussions on there. There's a bunch of speakers from the US, also from Europe and in Asia. And of course, for those of you who know Anna Mocha as well, we've in fact, Rebecca, you've had Yat on your show before. He is incredibly inspirational, and he's going to be doing a talk there. And there's going to be other kind of gaming companies talking about things like crypto, things like blockchain, NFTs, and all these kind of things. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And then finally, we've also got the Connected Cities being organized by KPMG. That's more a kind of corporate kind of event, but we're talking a lot about the smart city technologies that's been deployed. It also talks about what's other locations are doing. So for example, I think in the past we've had features on Berlin, we've had one of Copenhagen and other kind of places. And I think there's going to be, a lot more kind of discussion in this kind of area as well. So, I urge you, if you're interested, to potentially look at what's happening tech-wise in the region, to actually come physically, we just open up, or if not, do sign up virtually and get involved. There's a lot of different opportunities, whether you're looking for potential customers, pitch opportunities, connecting with potential business partners and investors. So we're looking forward to welcoming you.
So this is both virtual and this is a hybrid event then? The whole week is hybrid?
We are really hoping it's going to be hybrid. I
Uh-huh.
mean, it's just like we do need to still look at the social distancing rules closer to the time, but the intent is definitely to have the whole week hybrid, yes.
Sure. Okay. And it's all gonna, and if you're doing it physically there, it will be at what, at the Hong Kong Convention Center, at Cyberport, at
Well, the event is actually the whole week. The umbrella actually covers a lot of independent events organized by different event organizers. So they will have their own locations,
I see.
being chosen for that.
Okay. So people can pick and choose which element they want out of the whole week long, right?
Absolutely. So, if you go to our website, the startmeup.hk website, under the festival kind of tab, you'll get a lot more information. You can choose the types of events you're interested in. You can get involved in different ways, whether you want to put yourself forward as a speaker, for example, or
Okay.
yeah.
Sounds good. And there went the link up here on the chat box. So thank you
Yep.
for that.
That's
So
it.
I remember attending this. I've been to it many times, many years.
Yes.
And usually Silicon Dragon does an event within that too. So, but I'm just remembering when Elon Musk spoke.
Yeah, we were incredibly lucky that first edition, actually. It was about
Yeah, I'm not so sure you would get him now, but maybe.
no, I think he's moved on. I mean, he was a very big person even then,
Yeah,
but I think he's actually really entered the stratosphere. Pardon the pun.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was incredible. You can actually still see his talk actually on YouTube. But it really was very good.
Okay. Also, you just reminded me that there's that Yatsu video as well from Animoca Brands.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll share that out.
Right.
Actually, I did a couple interviews with him too, and I think they're on YouTube, so you can check those out.
I will too.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, good. Thank you, Jane. That was a very good preview of the Start Me Up Hong Kong Festival coming up in September. I can't wait. And yeah, I think it's a great program. It's a great initiative. And how many years is it now? Since 2013?
Yeah, this will be our 7th edition, actually. And Rebecca, you've been such a fantastic supporter from day one. It's much appreciated, being that bridge actually between what's happening here and what's happening in the Bay Area.
Yeah, the bridge does help.
Yes.
The footpath. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much. And yeah, I'm going to close out the program now and thank everyone for joining us and staying with us throughout the program. And thank you, Jane, as well. Okay. So now, as you can see, that's the date of the program coming up, and it's running through our program one last time. Our Circle membership, if you like this program, please join our Circle membership, and we'll welcome you to all of our events online and in person. We'll be starting some VIP events as well soon. So, okay. Thank you to Cyberport for your support as always. We love doing our events at Cyberport, so hopefully we can get back to doing that. And Invest Hong Kong, thank you again. I think we all got a great preview of what's happening in Hong Kong and why you should be there. So with that, thank you again to everyone who stayed with us. And also one more announcement. Our next program is on the metaverse, and we have a couple of metaverse VCs who are going to be speaking, and that's May 11th at 4 p.m. Pacific time. You can check it out on our website, silicondragonventures.com, and you can sign up for the event there too. So thank you again. Hope you have a good day or a good evening. Take care now. Bye-bye.